Good morning, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Missions Monday here at Greater Grace World Outreach. I'm your host today, Pastor Jason Moore, and we have some special guests with us, Pastor Peter Taggart and Pastor Maciek from Warsaw, Poland. So just before we get going today, our theme is going to be on purposing the purpose of conferences and how to have some practical tools to build effective ministries in regards to conferences. And so glad to have Pastor Peter Taggart with us today. He's the COO here at Greater Grace, wears many hats, and he is a dear friend. And Pastor Peter, great to have you. And just whatever's on your heart today, we're talking about conferences, why they're important, how to pick speakers, how to hit the target in regards to gathering people together and learning from one another. So welcome, sir.
Hey, it's great to be here. I feel very privileged to have Pastor Maciek as part of the presentation here. He is the king of conferences based on my experience a few years ago in the Poland conference. So I've been looking forward to hearing from him. But just maybe, just briefly, like we've been to conferences, many over the years, like, I don't know, who knows, 40, 50, both domestic and overseas. And then I've had an occasional privilege of actually being a conference speaker, being one of the featured speakers, is mostly in Thailand, where that happens. And so I'm speaking, can I prove this from the Bible? I don't know if I can prove it from the Bible, but I know that my experience has been this way, is that when large groups of people gather together with expectation and with paying a price, it seems like there's a special blessing on those gatherings that can be like unique. So on the one hand, whenever 2 or 3 are gathered, he's in the midst. And whether you're preaching to 2 people or preaching to 2,000, doesn't matter. God is there. But when we come together, it's amazing. And I think part of it is just the humility that is required for people to gather. Okay, so I'm going to, get in my car, get on a plane, and go somewhere else where, I won't be at the center of attention. I'll be with a large group of people, and maybe I'm just a spectator. But we're submitting to each other's portions, and we are receiving from the greater body of Christ than just what's in my local assembly or what's in my local area or region. And then especially when I go to another country, you're really, there's like I want to use the word division. That's not the best word, but you're going to bump into things that happen different than happen here, and you start to find out what is the non-negotiables and what we do negotiate, what can be cultural and different, but God's in it all. And for example, like a prominent example might be in the United States, at least in Greater Grace churches, at least in this Greater Grace church, dance tends not to be part of our worship services. But if you go to Africa, they're dancing down the aisles, and it's just like amazing. And it's like awesome. All right, do we do that here? We don't. Are we against it? We're not. But to try and pull it off here, I just don't think it would work. So these are the things that we learn. But then on a bigger scale above that, we just like iron sharpens iron, and we're with people, and we are submitting to different portions, hearing from people we don't normally hear from. And like as a pastor, I'm not a senior pastor of a church, but I know as a church member, sometimes a guest will come, and that guest will have a portion that, 3 months or 6 months later, I remember what that guest said, where my own pastor, it doesn't kind of work that way. It takes a little more effort to make that happen, and we just have to be free and available to receive those portions, and just to take my people and present them to somebody else for edification and for life is just like God is so in that, because we see it. And I know as a person who speaks at a conference on occasion, I think you've probably experienced it, Pastor Jason, but you go, it's like, where did that message come from? And the only explanation for that message being what it was is that the Holy Spirit is very interested in those people that you're in front of, and you really are like the vessel, and you get things that you like I said this, there's just things that happen with me, I know, like in Southeast Asia that just do not happen in the Western Hemisphere, and I think it's just like God's blessing on conferences. So that is like what I see as the spiritual underpinnings of it. I could say also that, and this maybe isn't the most edifying thing, but I'm going to say it, is that, I heard this said years ago, and I've heard it repeated, is sometimes we have conferences just to see who shows up. It's like, there is like a little bit of a challenge or a test for the body. You go to a place people that could be there, they're just making decisions, and so it's a godly challenge, I think, for people. How much do you value the body of Christ? Will you let we spent thousands of dollars to make ourselves available, and can you spend 20 and give up a few days of your time to be at this thing? And that goes the other way also. When people from around the world are coming to Baltimore, how important is it to me as a local parishioner to come and be a part? So it's just like God, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together, and do it all the more as you see the day approaching. And so we've just really had challenges this year with conferences. I don't want to say the C word, but we know what we're talking about here. We've had challenges this year. And I have a fear, I think it's hopefully a godly fear, that I or we could learn to live without gathering with the assembly, and that we can learn to live without conferences. And I do not want to do that. And it bothers me. Hey, we can meet on Zoom. Well, I'll tell you guys, Zoom is not the same. Zoom is awesome. We're meeting on Zoom right now, I think. I'm not sure what technology we're using, but it is not the same as being there. And if it's all we have, it's great, but being there face to face. So we just want to have tremendous encouragement, and we want to have a purpose within our Greater Grace churches that no, we're not going to operate this way. We're going to operate this way, the other way, where we meet. And I was just with just talking to a local pastor here on our staff, and talking about churches in Baltimore that are still not meeting. And I say, God bless them. They're making decisions as they make them for the local assembly. But we've just made a different decision here. And I'm really hoping that we can, God will open doors. And no, it's not waiting until, but we're gonna intercede before God that He would open some doors, and allow us to travel either way. So just maybe on a point I could make about conferences is that when we put on a conference, we have to remember that we are hosting people, and we love people. And when we plan this event, people are going to come, and those people are trusting us that we're going to have an event, like a place for them where they can come and they can be comfortable, maybe not spiritually comfortable, but they feel like they're being hosted and welcomed. And this is like so important that we don't be familiar with that, but that we really apply ourselves to it and treat it as professionally as we can, as God's given us capacity. And we had the European conference in Warsaw maybe 4 years ago, and Pastor Majic was the guy on the ground there. But I think, Pastor Majic, didn't we meet weekly? Didn't we have?
Yes.
And just because it's you need to. And then the famous last minute pulled the plug in Budapest a couple of years ago. We met with them for probably 6 months. First, we met and met and met and met and met. And one would think that you could just write this down on a piece of paper and have it. And maybe if you have the capacity to do that and the team to do that, that's like okay with me. But kind of the way we operate here in Baltimore is safety and a multitude of counselors. And I don't know if he remembers it, but Pastor Schaller coined the phrase a grenade meeting, where you meet, you get a bunch of people in the room. What are those people doing there? Maybe they'll come up with something, and they throw grenades at the plan, and the grenade goes off, and if the plan fails, then it's time to change that plan. We actually have another one tomorrow at our weekly staff meeting. That's going to be devoted to International Convention, which is next week. I think, is that a week from tomorrow it starts? So we're off and running, but that'll be one of those meetings. And in my own office, I'm going to have a grenade meeting today, just in prep, because I don't want to walk in unprepared with Pastor Schaller in the room. But you throw in some people that maybe don't need to be there, and they start asking dumb questions. But they're not dumb questions. And I said that, but there's no such thing as a dumb question. Like, thank you for asking that. And it's not, oh, we got that, don't ask that question. No, thank you. We need to be hearing from you. We want to expose ourselves, because if we don't do it now, then in the heat of the battle when the conference is going on, it's very difficult to fix things at that point in time. So this next thing is he who has ears, let him hear. To as many as can receive it, and those who can't, we cannot demand this of people. But if we can have like when you put on a conference, there's almost always a hosting church. I mean, sometimes you just go cold turkey to a resort or some place and you just do it there where no one's there. But usually, for edification, we want to have it in a local church that's already on the ground there. And it's great. Of course, the larger the church is, the better, because you have more resources. Pastor Maciek, being on a church that's on the small side, he experienced the joy of putting it on with small resources. But Budapest, we were there for years. They had a lot of resources there. Of course, in Baltimore, we have a lot of resources there. The resources are really people. People who are willing, that you can delegate things to, and can take on certain aspects of it and just take the ball and run with it under leadership and with good communication. But it's great if your local church, staff or local assembly can have a mindset that my role in the conference in my church is not just to have a nice week and hear some messages, but my role in my local assembly is to be like a great host, whatever that means. And you can't demand that of people, but you can communicate it, and you can start. And we just, like, I kind of died to that years ago with what I do here and with the staff and in my office, and then when I was in the finance office. If I get some whatever I get, whatever sessions I can be at, great, it's a blessing, but I'm here to serve. I'm here to make it so it's a blessing for other people. And before we, how are people comfortable? How are people made comfortable when they come to a conference? First and foremost is, does anybody care about me? Is there a personal touch that I get, like someone knows who I am? And for some of you remember the days, when we started doing this, probably 15 years ago at this point in time, we were not very good at it. At least the registration process was. I remember some of those old days with just mobs of people at registration, and just some bad days where I'm just standing on chairs and yelling at people to get in line just because I couldn't deal with it. It's not a good experience, and you want to be set up. I used to be in the hospitality industry up in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, which is a resort area, and I worked in that field in a sort of a small inn bed and breakfast. And you'd have people coming up from New York City for the weekend, and if you're going to have problems, it was going to be on Friday evening when people are checking in. When they're showing up, they're landing, they're tired, they've traveled, they've had a bad week at work, they've been in the car for a couple hours, they show up, and now they want to relax, and just how you greet them, treat them, carry your suitcases up. If you can get past that time, it's amazing. And it's kind of like that with a conference. When people show up, how are they treated? And I'm going to just tell you a few, like maybe these are fun, hopefully they're fun stories. And I'm not going to change the names to protect, they are innocent, but it's just, I've had a few, not bad conferences, but just bad experience within a great conference. I want to say that. It didn't ruin my weekend, but maybe someone else that might have, who just have less of a capacity for pain tolerance. But we all remember, I don't know, was it 1997, the famous St. Petersburg conference, where there was no heat in the hotel, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And I wore everything. I wore like my pajamas, long underwear, multiple pairs, everything I had, I would wear when I went into to hear Pastor Stevens up there preaching in a coat. And I think that was probably out of the control of whoever was that was just like, So anyway, that's an experience I had there. And then one time this is probably the first time I went to Thailand. It was not a conference. It was just I went there to visit, and I was out on the street. The first night, Pastor Walsh, he picked me up at the airport. He's just very much at home there. And he takes me out on the street. He buys some pineapple. I'm eating some pineapple. Like, this is great. Okay, so the next day, I'm by myself, and hey, I know what to do. I go out in the street and buy some pineapple. So I went out and bought the wrong pineapple. I guess it was on ice, where the ice had, I guess what he bought was fresh pineapple right out of the shell or whatever. But I bought some pineapple that was on ice. So it's just bad water. They make ice out of it. It melts. And I ate this thing, and 1/2 an hour later, it's like, kaboosh! This thing hits my stomach. And it's like, I am just out of commission for 3 days.
Oh.
And in Thailand. And I'm in my hotel room, just suffering, and not just suffering physically, but it started to weird me out. If there's any 2:00 in the morning, if there's anything I could do to get out of here and be back in my own, under my covers, my own home, I would do it. But there was no way out. And God help me with Bible verses. But during that time, Pastor Walsh visited once, stops by. Hey, you doing okay? Here's some, he had some home remedies which work, and then he leaves. I'm like, don't leave me, But he has stuff to do, so he leaves, And it's so I'm just there isolated. But this can happen to people, and it was just it was like a bummer. It would have been great, if someone had been able to spend a little more time with me, and then just to pull it out. When I finally got better 3 days later, the best breakfast I ever had in my life was at the Walsh's house. Mariuka make me scrambled eggs and real toast with real jam on it. It was amazing. So that was that. And then the first time I went to Eurocon, this was in Budapest. I got there. I think I'm pretty sure that I was greeted very well at the airport, right? And then I got to the Tulip, and I figured this is the conference hotel. Everybody knows about this conference. So it's I was recovering or whatever, just from the trip. I come, people were gone. I come down, the session has already started, and I just do not know where the church is. Oh, well, I'll just ask at the front desk, because this is the big conference hotel. Everybody's here. I go to the front, hey, where's this church conference? Nobody knows. And it's okay, I thought this was the place here. What's happening, So I'm wandering the streets of Budapest trying to find this place, trying to communicate with people that don't speak English, and people afraid about who's this nutcase waving around a Bible? It's it was just a bad experience, And if we can, it was a great conference, but if we can spare people some of that by anticipating, what is, and we're going to use this as American, hip, terminology, but what is the guest experience? And we got to think through that guest experience. Are they coming to Baltimore? Are they going to get lost on the Beltway? Mm-hmm. Are they going to get lost? And then once they drive in, where do they park? We got to, how big is our parking? 3 acres, I don't know, several hectares is our parking lot. And where they park, and then where do is it obvious where they go? What do they do when they're here? And when they come in, is there a smiling face who cares about them, who actually knows something? It's a bummer asking somebody a question and being told, I don't know, you know. And I don't know, but I don't know, sorry about, I just don't know what to tell you, as opposed to, I don't know, but I will find out who knows. Like that's a very different thing, you know. And when I was in West Africa, they're very hospitable there, and people ask someone for directions. They will walk with you for a half an hour to get you where you're supposed to go. Wow. And we just need people with that type of that mentality when we are hosting people, you know. So just what's the guest, you know, bathrooms, is it organized? I mean, I just without naming names here, there's certain places in the world that are less organized than others, and just go to a place and sessions don't start when they're supposed to start. It gives you a feeling like of insecurity, like why, you know, what am I, you know, why did I travel around the world to be at this place if, you know, you couldn't even put any, not that, does that thought enter my mind for 3 seconds, then I repent, all right? But other people that might be in there for 30 seconds or for 30 days, you know, like you know, and it's, you know, if you have a good experience with a business, you tell one person, right? If you have a bad experience with a business, you tell 10 people. And so it's on us, and I know I'm just having fun with this, but it's really, do we love people? Do we care about them? Do we lay our lives down for them? Or do we say if they were filled with the Spirit, they wouldn't have problems? It wouldn't bother them. They just roll with it. Well, sometimes people aren't filled with the Spirit, and sometimes I'm not filled with the Spirit. And the more I have to roll with, the more it's difficult it is for me to be filled with the Spirit and really receive it. So that's how I'm thinking about it. You know, where do I go? Where is this stuff? When's the thing happening? Who's around me? When I go to registration, is it a scene? Is it a bad scene with a pile of people there that makes, you know, and then are people churning me through the line and they don't, you know, all that type of stuff. And it just takes a ton of planning and a ton of anticipation to get through that. So this is like I don't know if it's my area of expertise, but it's certainly my area of experience. In terms of planning the conference, you know, you cut me off anytime I'm going too long here, Pastor Jason.
Well, yeah, these are excellent points. I mean, just maybe we could review them and hear from Pastor Maciek. I think we have Ulla Larson, who's been integral as far as the Budapest conference for many, many moons. But I love what you're saying, Pastor Taggart, hosting people, like the guest experience, having a personal touch, having a team that's, you know, vested in the sense of wanting to be there, not just, you know, just not having to force them to do what they're doing, but really have a prayerful but an organic but yet organized approach. I think these are huge things that you're saying, because can we control everything that happens in a conference? No, but we certainly can get in front of it and, you know, have this idea of anticipation, like what is the guest experience? And you know, I love how you started out, like the humility to gather together, submitting to one another's portions. I think that's a huge thing. And Pastor Maciek, I want to include you here in a moment on that thought, like the idea of the PolCon, and there's one coming up, I believe. You do summer camps and are very active in Eastern Europe, which is one of the most awesome places in the world, by the way. You know, just loving the spirit of the people there that love to be together. And let me ask you this: when you think of a conference gathering together, it, like Pastor Taggart so well articulated, it's such a ministry on so many levels. I remember our early years coming into Poland and in Hungary, just from the Ukraine, and just coming into a conference, you're immediately edified. You've been maybe beaten up for months, and you come in, you see iron sharpens iron, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I just want to collapse in the arms of the body of Christ. And Pastor Maciek, maybe I just have you share for a few minutes, like, what are some non-negotiables when you put together a conference? Like, what are some things that you're shooting for that in your mind say it's a successful conference?
First of all, thank you, Pastor Taggart, for saying those thoughts. When I was working with Pastor Taggart on Eurocon, we had this, I would say, precious time once a week when we were discussing all the details that I was even not aware of. he was like so perfect with this visitor experience, how people are thinking when they come. So he even like mentioned some things that I wasn't even aware of. Like if do we have like diapers for like for young kids when they will be with parents. So it's like very important to think about this visitor experience. Um, uh, uh, I'm I am there.
Yeah, go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, okay.
You're good.
I thought that I was freeze. Okay, but that's for me. What I think during these conferences, it's is the presence that matters. Because it's something different to say I will pray for you. It's of course this is like very important to pray for someone, but it's different things when you can hold someone's hand, look into their eyes, and pray together. It's like totally different. That's why I strongly believe that presence it's something that matters, and we need to get together. We as like Polish churches, we even we decided we will even fight for this unity, to have this fellowship together as a churches, because of course we have like right now we have 4 churches in Poland, and we could do it our own conferences, our own meetings, but we decided we want to keep this unity and this fellowship among all churches in Poland. And we of course, we're doing this PolCon once a year. That's a summer conference, and this is the biggest thing that we're doing here in Poland. But we also do like this Bible school, and we call this traveling Bible school, because once a month we're going to one of the church for a whole weekend, and people are going like we had 2 weeks ago in Warsaw. So pastors and people from Krakow, from Gdańsk, and from Wrocław, they came to Warsaw, and we had Bible school together. And that's built this unity. And this is what we believed. And we decided we're going to fight for this. Because during pandemic, there was difficult to do it. But we decided, it doesn't matter what's going to happen, we want to do it. Because we believe that present is something that matters, and we are the church, global, worldwide church, not like small church in Warsaw, but we are part of something bigger. That's why I do wherever I can to attend all the Eurocon or convention in Baltimore. This year, I don't know. I still believe. I still hoping. we even try. Like Pastor Taggart helped me. I even applied to U.S. Embassy in Warsaw, and I tried to get this exception for national interest, but they said, well, for you to be in Baltimore, it's not national interest, so we're not going to give you expected. But that is like something that I believe that I needed, because as overseeing pastor from whom I'm learning, I need this fellowship. I need to be to listen other pastors and to be with other pastors, to pray together, to discuss all the issues. And it's like something that it's like putting the gas to the car. Sometimes I feel like I'm going on almost on empty, but those kind of conferences for me is like fill up the gas to the full, and then I can go again, and that's why I believe it's so important to do it, to be together and have this fellowship. Yeah.
Pastor Maciek, I remember the PolCon a few years ago. I just remember the joy of your staff and
Yes.
just the way you handle details. There was no like I didn't see any anger or frustration. I just saw lots of joy and unity, and we're looking forward to the next one. for sure.
Yeah, you know what? That's one point that I want to mention also. I remember when I find out that we will. I mean, when we find out that we will have Eurocon in Warsaw, and I remember being in Budapest, I was kind of intimidated by even the thought that, oh my gosh, this big conference in Warsaw, because I had experience with conferences like 100, maybe 150 people, and then like 1,000 people. How are we gonna do it? But I realized that the team is very important, and I find out that it's better to work with one person that has a heart for that than work with 10 professionals.
Yes.
Because that's what makes difference. And I would prefer work with like handful of people than working with hundreds of people that are professionals, but to have some people that they have heart for this.
Ula, come on here. Let's say our listener today is maybe never done a conference and they're asking this question: how do I pick the topics? How do I pick the speakers? How do I take care of the kids program? What are some non-negotiables, just the framework of a conference that, yes, of course, it's about training, encouragement, and tools and such, but how does someone pick or build the framework of a conference?
Well, I think that there's, first of all, who is your audience? And you're going to have different, like we do the pastor's retreat in October. What do we call it? Like getaway, whatever that is. So that's a specific audience. And we're going to have topics that are appropriate for a group of pastors that are together. And I think it can come from two different sides. First would be like who was the leader of the ministry, and what's the Holy Spirit want to say to the church, and that really I think comes from prayer, comes from discernment, it just is a very spiritual process there, where we're listening, waiting. I know we're big here on picking a conference theme, and sometimes those themes are very helpful, and people really are able to rally around that theme and gather and have messages related to it. And then there's other times when you have a conference theme, and it's sort of like guys don't pick up on it. They preach what they preach. And so I think the speakers, first and foremost, do I have something from God? Am I anointed? But then, so there's that approach to it. And then the other one is just what are topics of interest? I know that here we'll have, definitely there's families that come, and there's always interest in marriage, in children, some interest in finance, interest in teenagers, and people want to hear these things. We're going to help people with their lives, and then we're helping pastors with their ministries. A special time for pastors where you might, we talk about preaching, we talk about evangelism, we talk about missions, we talk about counseling, those different things. So it's really a combination of those two things. There's interest in women's, there's women's gatherings. You don't want to leave those out, in my opinion, because it's just helpful just to make the statement, and then to give women a chance to minister to women, because they've got a portion sometimes that men don't. So that's the process that I've seen played out. Ultimately, is there an anointing? You have to have God, communicating and speaking to people. I would caution against. Oh, it's kind of a funny thing, Pastor Jason. It kind of goes both ways. Like we don't want to make people. We don't want to assign speakers because people will get mad if they don't get a chance to speak. But there is some of that also, where you do want to use portions, and you sure don't want to run a one-man show. Like, you bring people, and we have something to offer here, and other people. So you want to mix it up that way also. So those are some of the considerations I would talk about in terms of how we plan what those sessions are going to be.
No, it's excellent. I think obviously what Pastor Maciek said about your team building, you want people that are heart, not just professional. And I think the speakers, are they people that are living what they're speaking? Do they have experience? Do they have that anointing that you're speaking about? I love our Bible college because it's not just theory. It's action. It's experience. People that have lived the message, not just spoken the message. So, Ula, I want to get you in here. Thanks so much for your patience. Ula's been she works in our missions department, an integral part of conferencing for years.
Yes.
And there is a tremendous, I know in our department, working with housing and transportation and logistics, it's an unbelievable amount of little details and striving in the right sense to be the best host. I know that's your spirit, Ula. And what's your experience in regards to when, like Pastor Taggart said, a grenade meeting? I love that. Like you have a plan, you present it, and then the grenade goes off, and it's like, oh my goodness, wait a minute, my nice, neat plan and everything is now just like challenged. With you in Budapest and beyond, how have you handled some last-minute changes, and how have you just adjusted?
Yeah. Well, I just calculated here. I was involved in 7 different Eurocons in Budapest, and very much, and then a couple of European other ones too, because I was part of a international team, and they flew me to different countries to help set up conferences. So I've done a lot of conferences. So in Budapest, as you said, we had a large team. So in the beginning, it was just me and maybe 2 other people. And as we worked closer and closer, more and more people got involved because of the day-to-day things. And so then it was less and less for me, which was nice. But yes, you always have to be prepared for some major thing to happen. Computers always go berserk just before a conference when you're dealing with all the emails and registrations. That's always part of the program, not the plan, but the program. And also you just learn to see you have to categorize what is the most important thing here. What do we need? What is needed to be done now? What can be done in 4 weeks? What can be done on the week of the conference? What has to be done a year before? And it's to me, it was always vital to categorize, okay, now this is like the short-term goal for this time. This is what I work on. And that kind of helped me compare, like putting in blocks, so I didn't have to stress about what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
And but there's always things that are going to happen. You just have to plan on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then especially in Europe, you have so many people, because I was the one who communicated with all the people coming, and you always have to learn, like, most of us, all of us actually, English is not our first language. So you learn to communicate in a way that everybody can understand and not misunderstand when people not write properly or don't speak properly. And that took away a lot of things, a lot of anxiety and a lot of, stress to me personally. And then I have to say, one time in Malmö, Sweden, it was Pastor Risto Kuro who was head for that conference. And I had flown in there before to help set up the hotels. And then I came for a couple of weeks before the conference. And it was just so amazing because that was a very small team, very small church. And 2 ladies had joined them from Stockholm, which is 6 hours north. And he said, for you 2, I want you to be praying. So out of all the few little team he had, he separated 2 people to just be praying. And they did some other things, but they prayed several hours a day. And it was amazing. That conference was so anointed. It was very anointed.
Good. That's very good.
And I think that's so easy to forget. Like, oh, yeah, we need to pray.
Yeah. Hey, I was going to add one thing, and Pastor Majic wasn't able to pull this off at the Warsaw conference, and I understand why, but it's great if you can set it up so that the conference coordinator, in a sense, has nothing to do once the conference actually starts. Because
Yes.
if there's a guy that like a go-to guy for questions, but he's in the middle of something,
Exactly.
it's very, very difficult, you know.
Pastor Maciek, just want to ask you this question, and we can open it to everybody, of course, but how valuable is to have a convention website that would maybe field questions on housing, transportation, getting people's flight information correct, so you don't have all these multiple sources coming at from all directions. But how important was a website for you when you put on the PolCon?
Well, that was something I treat this as something very important, because I know that, especially for people when they go to the new country, they don't know nothing about. They never been there. Like they came to Warsaw after so many years in Budapest, so they don't know how to get around. So we decided, let's do it website that all the main information will be there, that people can go there and find out all they need in one place. So hopefully that worked well. We even went to this Polish Airlines and we said that we're gonna host this conference, and they gave a special discount for people coming to the to Eurocon on Polish Airlines. So everything was there, hotels and that helps, because now everyone is using the internet. I find out even in the church, I would say even majority of new people that come into church, first of all, they go on website and checking this church on website, because we live in the era that everything is digital, and everyone has access in their phone, and they're checking everything. So to have this visitor experience very good, it's good to have this website with all the information, especially if conference is in the place where people never been before, because they could be kind of lost how to get, like Pastor Taggart, he came to Poland. We couldn't pick him up from airport because we didn't have enough people. But hopefully, all the information on the website was so kind of easy to read that he managed to came by himself to hotel and conference room. So
Uber, right?
So that's important.
the technology, Uber, tram. That was an experience. I remember traveling with you on a tram a couple mornings. That was exciting. Yeah. Maybe that's blocked out of your memory.
No, that situation was a little bit different. I don't want to go into it, but I just know I was. Actually, here's what it was. We had to rent a car for Pastor Shabeli. So I rented a car at the airport, and there was, what was the guy's name? Joseph and Heinal were there, which is, and Heinal's the ultimate hostess,
hostess for the mostest.
So I hope she's listening to this, because that'd be another conference tip. Hire Heinal.
That's right. Multitasking. She eats and breathes this stuff. Amazing.
Yeah, there was something in that in my mind, and maybe it'll come back to me. But you're the host. You gotta keep things moving here.
No, I want to kind of highlight and think, when you think of it, Pastor, just
Okay.
jump in. Fellowship and unity. Pastor Maciek, you brought this up. You do summer camps. Again, the conferences don't necessarily need to be huge. They can be just gathering, for instance, those 4 churches together in Poland on a lake. I know they did that in Budapest. We've done that in southern Ukraine. But to fight for the fellowship and the unity. And I just think sometimes, and maybe Ula, you want to comment on this, when there's not good communication with other churches in your country, when you leave things alone in the wrong sense, error can come in. And so just to kind of say, just fighting, how would you fight for fellowship and unity in a conference? And how would that look like on a large scale or on a small scale? Does that question make sense to either of you?
Isn't that more a pastoral question?
Yeah,
No, I mean, like, you always look after people. You always, like how you do anywhere, like you try to invest in people, and the same thing with churches, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was just going to add to that, Pastor Jason. So here I am. We're putting on a conference in Baltimore, and we've got people, with churches. We're not just inviting the pastor, but we're asking that pastor to bring his people. And so I would say, like, there'd be communication with those. You can't talk to 600 pastors around the world, but who can we talk to? Can we be praying together, hearing from them? How would they like the conference to go? Are there things that they're seeing and needing and would like to hear at this conference? So that's really good to include people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you're doing that with your PolCon, Pastor Majek. You're talking, it's a PolCon, it's not a MagCon, right?
Yeah, well,
ConnectCon.
no, yeah,
What's fun?
it's we call this PolCon because it's in Poland, but
Right.
we have visitors from different countries.
Yeah.
Like before this COVID thing, we had like visitors from almost 10 countries participating in this conference. So it's important because I think that we live in the age that like personal independence is very strong.
Mm-hmm.
People are building like higher walls that they hide behind these walls.
Yes.
That's why I think that the presence it's something that matters, and we need to fight sometimes to go behind those walls that people are building just to connect to each other, because that's what we need, like the body, this body life, not only like like Zoom, like you said, but we need this presence, because that's I think that is needed for us, especially in those times. Like last year, I remember we did this PolCon, and I was kind of like, let's say, not afraid, but I was kind of nervous because like everyone in Poland was canceling every like gathering, every conference. So we said, well, should we cancel also? But we prayed with other pastors. There is one more thing that we asked Polish pastors, we like at least once or twice a year, we gathering together with wives somewhere, we going somewhere and just spend time together, whole weekend, only pastors with wives. So that's built our fellowship, and that's built our unity. So that's what we also fighting for. But we decided that doesn't matter what, we're gonna do it, this PolCon. And a funny thing was that 2 weeks before our PolCon, in the same area in the mountains that we had this PolCon, there was this one of the church was doing this healing meeting. It was so funny because but someone in this meeting was sick, and the whole church was shut down because of that, for quarantine. And that was like 2 weeks before our conference. And I said, what's gonna happen? But we did it anyway. And to see people, how they were so hungry for fellowship, because they were sitting in their house for like a couple months. They couldn't go out. But then we get together this they were so happy to be together, to spend time together. So we decided we're gonna do it anyway. I mean, we didn't shut down the church because we said, well, people need this fellowship. If they want to come, let them come. So that's what we doing, and I hope hopefully God will use this and protect us, because that's what we're praying for.
Excellent. Pastor Taggart, I had a thought just come to my mind as Pastor Maciek is talking, and I love that you're engaging the pastors and their wives. I got to say, wives are a huge part of a pastor's life, and it's such a good move there to include, because let's say the pastor's not experiencing the warfare, the wife for sure is, and the kids as well. So encouraging thought there. Workshops, Pastor. I mean, when we're talking about who are we talking to, what's the takeaway we want people to get from the conference? Let's say a pastor's bringing their right arm, their right hand man, their number two, and there's workshops, and training is a big word in my mind. We're only as effective as our training. So in a conference, how do you think about workshops and training, and how can we like flesh that out in the right sense to engage the number two man that's coming?
Yeah, that's one thing I forgot. When you talked earlier about planning speakers and sessions, I talked about families and family issues, but just ministry issues is another field. Like how do you do your teen ministry? How do you do your music ministry? How do you do your food ministry? On and on it goes, and so you want to find those people, whoever it is, and have them, like, again, we're using Warsaw as the poster child here, but they have like an amazing music ministry there. I'd be very interested in sitting and seeing how they do it, and learning from them. And other music ministries would be interested in that also. And then you want to focus on the number two man, right? And that's sort of a pet subject of mine, because I think that's really a neglected field. But just that guy, maybe there's an obvious number two, maybe there's a few different people in that range, but just to be talking, I mean, that's a whole other thing you could talk about, like what is a session for assisting pastors. We got, Ula works in an office as Pastor Schaller's, Pastor Shabelli's secretary, and that would be like an amazing, like there's people in all these churches that have that role. And you did work for Pastor Schaller at one point, I think, right, Ula?
Yeah,
so
in Hungary for 13 years.
Yeah, so you're like uniquely, suited to hear. You could it'll be like, afternoon. How to serve the pastor you're working. In his office. She could that type of thing. And it draws out portions, and it again, Ula's, we're talking about her, but it'd be good to recognize her once in a while for what she does over there, and then have other people benefit from that experience also. So this is how I'm responding to the question you're asking.
Very good. I think sometimes we have to think we must reinvent the wheel, but
even your role in reach and follow up. I mean, you've got this thing too, like a science, with God in the middle of it. But could other churches benefit from what we do here? I would say absolutely. And vice versa.
I think I've been in a lot of places just sharing just the nuts and bolts of it. Of course, there is some science, if we can.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to use that word. Follow the science, but in the right sense, there's some things we've learned and things that we know not to do.
Right.
But again, it goes back to what you originally said. Like, can we humbly gather and submit to one another's portion? I think that's a huge thing, because we can have this idea, I know what I've been doing X amount of years, but actually that's kind of a dangerous place, because that's like we can become crystallized, but we're always learning. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and of course, but Pastor Stevens was on the scene. He was kind of recognized as the head of the ministry, and I think Pastor Schaller has that to an extent, although that's just really dependent on the hearts, what's in people's hearts. But I would say this is like, I have actually 3 brothers, and my relationship with my dad was crystal clear. When he walks in the room, it's obvious who's in charge. But when he leaves the room, the brothers fight, And so I just want to commend Pastor Majek and all others around the world that are cultivating relationships with their brothers, which is really mutual submission, which is just a much more difficult thing to pull off. And I wouldn't want any of that in my heart or anybody's hearts when I'm thinking about coming to a conference. Well, I'm not going there because he never asked me to speak. That's in all of us at some level. But just wait, I am going to go to that guy, and I'm going to lay my life down for him without any recognition. What can I do to serve that man? These are good ways for us to think as spirit-filled believers.
Yeah, and I just think as we close here in the next few minutes, I know Pastor Schaller's heart is that it's a church-wide event. It's not
Mm.
just the staff event, but it's mobilizing the entire church. I know we focused a lot on hospitality and pastoral care and these types of things, but every joint supplies. And Pastor Maciek, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts, just how you mobilize your church. I think motivation, I think people's schedules, I think it's a Hercules effort that's exhibited here. But how do you mobilize your church?
I mean, it's
Or
it's a
anything you
matter
want to
of,
close with?
yeah, yeah. I think it's a matter of vision, to have like this one vision, because if people know the vision that we're going through, they will follow. And what Ulla said, that prayer is so important in all of this. Like you, Pastor Taggart, you mentioned the music ministry in our church, and remember, for many years, our music ministries was there was only my wife standing in the stage with the guitar, and that was it. That was it. That's nothing more. But she was praying for all the time. She was praying, God, bring more people to help me with this ministry. And in the beginning, God raised up our sons. One start playing guitar, and the second start playing like drums. But then she was praying and praying and praying, and then God brought like piano player, and she is like one of the best professionalists in Poland, and he God also brought with her husband that he is a piano tuner, and he sells pianos, so he brought to church a piano, and and it's everything because of prayer of my wife. I mean, so I think it's so important to before Eurocon, we also had this like all-night prayer meetings just to pray for this conference. It's without prayer, it's so difficult to do it in our own strength. But when we put everything in God's hand, He will help, and He will take care of all the details that we are even not aware of. He will take care of everything. So I would say that this is like the vision, and prayer is something that we need before we will do anything for God.
Excellent. Ulla, any closing comments here that you want to share with us?
I was thinking one session in Europe would be for translators, for the translators to get together, not to talk about the language itself, but how do I prepare as a translator? I used to translate in Sweden, and 2 conferences I translated for Pastor Stevens, and that was amazing privilege. But in general, just how do I follow the pastor who's speaking, and how can I help him?
Yeah.
Excellent. Pastor Taggart, we got 2 minutes here. What's your last thoughts?
Well, just
great portion today.
I don't know how. It's just something I should have jammed in earlier to this time is healing meetings. Anointing of oil, elders praying for people. It's a time to do it, and then also ordinations. We obviously we believe ordinations are really sort of the in the purview of the local assembly, but sometimes your church is so small you want help, and conference a great time to do that. But even just we've taken the time to be together, and the thing that I would not have talked about, but I've heard from multiple people, Ulla and Pastor Maciek and you, is prayer. It's like, this helps me. We gather together. We have a mini conference here, and I walk away with something edified and built up and helped by other people's portions.
Yeah, prayer is one of those things that it's the organic part of the organization, because of course we know the need, but God's provision might be unknown. We might know the whole church needs to be mobilized, but how's that going to happen? Best motivation is inspiration. So maybe in a message or through prayer, God will give you what's needed to just love people into action. And again, I just think prayer is one of those non-negotiables. I always love that term, non-negotiable, that you started earlier with. It's like, what do we want people to take away with? Well, is the conference going to go perfect? Maybe not, but they're going to touch the hem of the garment of the Master. And so God will give the increase in every area. So, hey, Pastor Maciek, Ula, thanks. Pastor Taggart, huge thank you for an amazing thoughts today. Our listening audience, hope you took away some great things. And thanks for being with us on Missions